Welcome back, team players. Today we are introducing the first of what will be a many-part series of If You Believe X, What You Must Do to Draft Successfully to be able to win the Mega Millions here on Draft Kings. Today is if you would believe the New England Patriots could win their division, what must happen? And in corresponding, how do you need to draft to be able to make the most of that belief? Because as Bob has said many times, you have to know your narrative if you're going to have success. It goes deeper than just X's and O's and statistical analysis, but into actually the situation, what will happen. In today's situation, the New England Patriots win the AFC East. Indeed. And I understand that this being the first one, people are like, Joe, how are you crazy like this? You realize that had the Patriots not won in week 18, they'd have the first pick overall. How can you possibly try to make an argument that there's a way for them to win their division? Well, if you look at their schedule and the way it's set up, obviously gets fully released this week. They have their hardest games on the road and their easiest games at home. Their home schedule is Atlanta, Buffalo, Cleveland, the Jets, Miami, Carolina's a road game. Sorry about that. Long story short, when you look at their entire home schedule, their only loss is the Bills, and they're probably going to split between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Atlanta Falcons. Their road schedule is a disaster. They're going to lose pretty much all of those games except for the one at the Jets because, well, they're the Jets. And then they'll win in New Orleans and then win in Carolina. You add it all up, it's a probable 10-win team. But 10 wins with Josh Allen doesn't equal them winning the division. So if you believe the New England Patriots are going to win their division, you kind of also by default have to believe that Josh Allen's going to get hurt. And that is the two major premises that we're going to go forward with this episode. Now, granted, we're obviously not rooting for anything, but if you're under that mindset, it's the realistic way in which it could happen. We are a live show for everyone watching us on replay. We start at 3:45 Eastern. We will be answering comments and questions live as we go. So when you look at schematically on the field, how are the Patriots most likely to win football games? And when you look at their actions in which they've done in the offseason, they've already begun to telegraph these moves. They are going to be a physical defense that runs the ball, low scoring, not exactly a fantasy gold mine, except for in the running back department. They're probably going to be a good fantasy defense to own, but that doesn't help you in the Mega Millionaire contest. So when we're looking at this, we're going to be shying away from the teams on their schedule. It's a little bit contrary to when you're building a team and trying to get as much 2-to-1 draws, but basically building your stack and then having at least one opponent against you. And the reason is we believe that the Patriots defense is going to have to be solid if they're going to win this division. It's going to have to be based upon low-scoring games. So they're built for that. They improved their offensive line. They went out and got one of the best running backs in the draft, and they are going to play keep away essentially, which makes a whole lot of sense from a broader standpoint. If the quarterback doesn't pan out, if Drake May has the rookie regression, which normally happens, we saw it happen with Stroud. Remember this time last year, Stroud was going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer by how good his rookie year. It's all probable that all of the rookies take a step back, certainly including Drake May. So how do you prevent that? You run the ball excessively well, you rely upon a short passing game, and you hope that Henderson can run instead of Drake May having to run for his life. So you add that all up, it's a completely plausible way that they can overcome an incredibly soft schedule. Again, only having to win the road games of at the Jets, at the Saints, and at the Panthers. Well, there's going to be a lot of people who win road games at the Jets, at the Saints and at the Panthers. So it's not really all that unrealistic. When we look at for today's particular draft, we will be working out of the second round pick, and this is going to be a great one. So obviously, when we're saying here, there's not going to be a whole lot of Patriots you're looking at in the second pick overall. But when we're building this team in its totality, because you're going to be trying to avoid Patriots per se, you're going to want to have Henderson for sure. We'll probably put Stevenson on this lineup and Henry on this lineup, given the fact it's the Patriot theme of this show. But those are probably the extent of the fantasy football scenario I see. Now, there may be another episode we do down the road where you believe that the second round or that the second year quarterbacks don't have a step back. That's not today's show. Today's show is Patriots to the playoffs. What is the scenario in which that can happen? Thank you all for sending in your questions. Welcome to the party, Jesse. And like I said, this draft's about to kick off here. And I'm going to hit upon another player that Bob and I haven't discussed a lot about, but you've never seen me draft. Bob has done it a couple times on himself, but I never have, and I probably won't. Saquon Barkley is, by all suggestions, who chalk should be for the second pick overall. I'm not going to draft him. There is so much history, not just from Saquon, but from the league that shows if you have more than 500 carries in a calendar year, you don't produce the following year. It's happened to Run CMC. It's happened to within Saquon earlier within his career. And to me, Saquon just screams a guy that's going to get hurt. So to me, this pick is going to either be Robinson or Chase. Chase obviously going with the first pick there. And this is going to be a little bit different build than you guys see from our other builds we do. Because I know I'm already putting Henderson, Stevenson, and Hunter Henry on this roster, it's more of a setback that says I need to have an elite running back early, and then we're going to be able to backfill with all these receivers as we go, knowing that, again, the Patriots receivers aren't exactly a gold mine of eventual talent. And that's, just the way that it is. I appreciate you saying the agree mark there, Jesse. Without Bob here being the co-host, you don't, I don't get my pushback with the element that Saquon is just due for injury. We're not going to be taking him. And welcome to the party, Bob. Today is if the Patriots make the play. Two major assumptions to get us there is Josh Allen is going to have to be hurt, and they're going to have to win running the ball defensive struggles. And they're up for it. So that's where we're at, Bob. Second pick overall.
I see Jesse's back. Jesse, good to see you, Jesse. Yeah, Joe, when it comes down to this, I've been noticing a lot from doing them both on DraftKings and Underdog. And approaching the drafts with a narrative structure in mind is a fun way to see how different strategies and different things play out. So, for example, in this type of strategy here, this is going to be one of those drafts most likely that is going to be not a run-heavy build. We are most likely going to build in a couple wide receivers coming up here. Taking a guy
absolutely.
Taking Trevion like in the 5th, 6th round, somewhere in there, wherever his ADP is at, and then maybe circling back to a guy like Ramondre, who we don't normally take, but his value is so low right now on both DraftKings and Underdog that if the Patriots were to be successful running the ball, then both of these players would probably have a really successful season. So knowing that, and then coupled in with that too, is the fact that, building in a couple of players from teams that play the Patriots. So specifically, Atlanta's a team that plays the Patriots. We have their number one running back in Bijan. Mm-hmm. We also know that they are a very strong run-heavy team at times. And in general,
I think that I can tell you guys already, when the Patriots Atlanta play, I'm going to be under 42 on that game. It's going to be a running like crazy and defense. Look, granted, Atlanta doesn't have a defense, so I think the Patriots will win it. But that's the reality. I mean, like I said, it's going to be a run-heavy, keep-away system. So, Bob, you're right. To the stake of this draft, knowing that we're going to be putting Henderson on this team, I'm certainly looking at a receiver here
Absolutely.
or at Lamar.
Take a wide receiver here. I want a wide receiver here.
So I'm looking at in all probability, I want to do Higgins and Garrett Wilson, or maybe Tyreek.
I'm okay with Higgins and Garrett Wilson. I'm okay with that.
Perfect. I hate the Jets, and I do believe the Patriots will beat the Jets both times. Both because we're doing a scenario about how the Patriots can make the playoffs, but also because I know the Jets suck, and they will be throwing for their lives, and there's no way around that.
All right, so Garrett Wilson here. And like I said, absolutely. I am absolutely okay building into this narrative as well, talking about divisional correlation, right? And so like guys like Tyreek and Garrett Wilson, for me, are one of those players that you can think about. Say your narrative for building your team. Say your narrative is that the Patriots are going to have to play a lot of catch up. Well, if that's the case, then I'm probably diving a little bit more into running backs on the opposite teams, because that means that they probably have built up a lead. I'm building in tight ends from those teams as well. But if we're presuming that they're going to be playing running the ball, I'm probably more likely to take wide receivers that are going to be playing them. So guys like, the AFC North wide receivers, the AFC East, the division, the NFC South wide receivers as well. I'm building in a couple of those as well, knowing that if a team is going to be successful, it's probably going to be, they have a decent enough, cornerback kind of group, but is it good enough, right? They let up.
I want to push back a little bit on that, Bob,
points last year. 24 points a game.
The Patriots don't have, under really any scenario that's realistic, the kind of offense that's going to separate in games a lot. It's going to have to be a slow clock management, game control style, because I just don't see them being able to be what the Dolphins were, where they can, or Cincinnati, where they can just know you're walking in and they're dropping 35 on you. It's a very real chance the season high in any given game is 27 for New England. And you can win that way, but it does mean most teams aren't ever going to be far enough behind where it's 2 scores or more, where they hit that desperation mode. So
no, that's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying in
that regards, I kind of feel it's wide open as far as the direction in which we can go.
But I'm saying from the perspective of when a team goes in to play New England, what part of their defense are they more likely to attack? Are they more likely to attack on the ground, or are they more likely to attack?
Oh, the secondary for sure. No, I agree with you on that.
So I am more willing
to force pass mode.
So I am willing to build that into my thinking and taking correlated bringbacks with that, so that if this assumption is something that you want to play around with and something that you think could come to fruition, that would be what I would want to think about doing. You get what I'm saying?
And we see 2 guys coming up here, knowing that the second pick is going to be Travion Henderson on this turn. That there's 2 guys who are going to be on their schedule coming up. Again, 2 guys that we don't normally draft. Part of these conversations and episodes is to put Bob and I out of our comfort zone as well. But on the Patriots schedule, there is Carolina, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. And of our ADP coming up here, it is McMillan, Flowers, and Metcalf. So one of those 3 should be this selection. Which one do you lean, Bob?
I'm going to lean Tet. Because I like what I saw out of Bryce Young at the back half of last year. We don't normally take Tet in the 4th round here.
Nope.
The other thing is that I think that Zay is a fairly average production kind of guy right now. I'm not head and shoulders in love with Zay Flowers as a fantasy asset, particularly in best ball, because his usage is kind of on a game-by-game basis. It's not where I want it to be, or where I think Tet's overall potential could be. You get what I'm saying? So, if I'm going in there and saying, okay, what is the ceiling?
You think that he's the ultimate blow up big, but not a solid floor guy? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, So when we look at the possible ceiling, when we look at a guy like Zay, what we saw last year was that Zay wasn't the touchdown guy. Okay, he was a yardage, moving the change, PPR, good enough, right? We look at Zay. I just want to pull up some of the rankings from last year with Zay. But when you look at how he performed last year, is it good? Yeah, sure, it's good. His spike week was fairly high when we consider PPR at 29, which is great. But then he had a lot of weeks where he wasn't finishing where you're drafting him at. So looking at the board right now, there's definitely not 30 wide receivers off the board right now. Correct?
No.
And when I look at his when I look at his finishes, he had 2 top 10
and
weeks.
We're talking about Zay Flowers again, guys.
Yeah, we're talking about Zay. He had 2 top 10 weeks, another 2 within the top 15, another 3 within the top 15, and the rest outside. Okay, so you're taking him within the top 20-ish wide receivers, and he is not proving to return that value the majority of the time. Whereas a guy like Ted gives you a pretty interesting ceiling potential if Bryce Young smacks again. Right? Because when we look at Zay, the pathway to touchdowns means that he's going to have to fight Lamar. He's going to have to fight Derrick Henry. He's going to have to fight Rashad Bateman, and he's going to have to fight the tight ends. So he's like 5th or 6th on the tight end pecking order, and he's just not getting enough to make him worth a 4th round pick. It just like I get the correlation to Lamar, but I would never take Zay even in a correlated stack with Lamar because I just don't feel that he's like that he is the number 1 guy. You get what I'm saying? Like he gets good targets, but I never feel like he does anything with them. And that could just be a misconception on my part. But when you look at the stats and you look at the books, just like we have, the reasoning is there. All right. So what's the plan for the 7th round here?
This is going to be Olave. They're playing the Saints. And I love having Olave as my 4th receiver. That's a little draft bias, but I absolutely love having Olave on the team.
But it also
sets up our team pretty nicely for 3 stackable cheap quarterbacks. And I like that too.
What I like here too is the divisional correlation for Tet and Chris Olave as well. So in this build, you're getting some Tet and Chris Olave love. We are going to build Ramondre into this build too. It's not a player we build. It's not a player we build often, and we will have to keep an eye on his ADP because we don't really take Ramondre.
It's 123 currently, so we're going to try to get him at 119 overall.
In this build, we are predicating, again, going back to the whole concept of today's episode, is we are predicating that when the Patriots win, they're going to win through running the ball and defense. And insofar as that's true, we also have 3 running backs that are going to play the Patriots this season. We have some wide receivers that are built into that schedule for the Patriots this season as well. But also these players on their own have their own schedules that look pretty good. One of the players that I also want to build into this team, knowing that we do feel that they're going to run the ball more, is I would like to take Hunter Henry.
Oh, Hunter Henry's good on this team. I agree with that.
Knowing that the short game, some things in the short game, we should keep our eye potentially on a wide receiver for New England as well. In the vein of Kyle Williams or Demario Douglas, maybe a little bit later. And if we need to, I think coming up here in this 9th or in this 8th round, Joe, that I'd want to keep my eye on Fields. But if you're not interested in Fields,
bingo, that's exactly where I was going, dude. He's at the top of the queue right now.
We could wait and then, even so, get Bryce Young and maybe even Drake May in there as well. But again, this build is predicated that they're going to run the ball and they're going to win through running the ball. So maybe we don't build Drake May into this line.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I broke the episode up with, Bob, is that part of the reason you can be against their passing game is that historically speaking, the second-year quarterbacks take a step back. This time last year, everyone thought that Houston had the next Hall of Fame quarterback, and Stroud was going to be the guy based upon his rookie year. Then he has step back. And that's just historically what happens. So now that they have a real running back there, someone who can take the load off of them, I don't see Drake May running around a lot. And again, I see him being a very ball control, more of a game manager style, which again, Hunter Henry plays into that very well. And I like that answer there. So for me, Bob, the ideal turn for us is Fields and Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram's not a guy we draft a whole lot. He's actually not even on New England's schedule. But I want to start getting some more Evan Ingram in my life.
I see where you're going with that. I see where you're going with that, but I don't really want to build that into this team specifically.
Cool. He's off the list.
Guys I'd like in this range or am starting to like in this range, Jack Beck. Guys that I'm starting to like that are coming down in this range, Darnell Mooney. Thinking about
Mooney works. That could be a double Falcons, and maybe we do Penix as a little stack too.
Thinking about players.
Yeah, we can do Fields and Mooney. I'm cool with that.
Players that have some room to give within their schedule. Keeping an eye. I noticed Pacheco went off the board now. We do have to start keeping our eye on Ramondre because soon after Pacheco, usually.
Well, Ramondre's currently is. I know he's not a guy we pay attention to. He's 123. Our pick on the second turn, not this one, but the one thereafter puts us at 119. So that's right in the Ramondre wheelhouse.
Okay. Just keep your head on a swivel for that one, though.
So I don't think we're going to miss out Ramondre. I will. I'm telling you right now, this is the risk after this pick, because this pick's going to be Mooney. Letting Ramondre take the run is obvious. When you're on the end, you obviously are risking the long run. But I don't think Ramondre will get picked up between to and fro.
If you're just joining us, we're doing something a little different this episode. So last week when we talked with everybody in the chat, we talked about drafting with different scenarios in mind. So in this draft, what you're seeing right now are players that sometimes we don't usually take. However, what our scenario that we're playing into right now is that the Patriots, if we believe, and this was something suggested by our audience member last week, if we believe that the Patriots would be successful, what is the scenario in which they are going to be successful? Running the ball, defense, Josh Allen gets hurt, playing a little bit of that divisional correlation, getting some of those scheduled opponents in there, particularly some guys from the AFC East. But you're going to notice that we also are carrying Tet and Chris Olave, and you might be wondering why. Well, they are on the Patriots schedule as well. They also don't have a terrible schedule themselves, knowing that they did not place well in their division. Starting off with Bijan, not a bad start at all. So as we go through, what we're talking about is just different scenarios that would have to play out in order for this to be successful. So what you're going to see is our goal right now is we believe that if the Patriots are going to be successful, they're going to do so running the ball. So we got Trevion Henderson. We're going to go after Ramondre, who's a player we don't take often. And then we're going to build in a backstack with Hunter Henry as well, because that short game is kind of what we're targeting, moving the ball in chunks down the field. We are most likely not going to target Drake May, but if he does fall to us, it would not be
we're going to do Drake May. He has to be on this turn. It would have to be Stevenson and May.
And that wouldn't be terrible at all, because I really don't like most things in the 11th round here. Like I said, I do like
I think I'd rather have Penix and Young, though, because I can get him later and we can throw a tight end on this roster.
And Penix and Young also
Stevenson and a tight end from just a team build perspective.
Penix and Young also give us that correlation on the other side of the board, a nice little divisional correlation on the other side, because I can see
anyway, so it doesn't matter.
I could see
Ramondre. Apologize, guys. I never thought Ramondre would have gone there.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
available at the time.
When people are drafting, and this is so if you're drafting on underdog guys, if you're drafting on underdog, what normally happens is that Ramondre is probably one of the last guys to go. I have seen him go as low as the 14th round in underdog, which is criminally low. We understand it, though. We understand why it's happening. But also at the same point,
you got the better running back on the team. We got the one you need.
At the same point in time, as you build out your teams, when we look at especially what the team in the 10th hole did, the David Montgomery, the Tony Pollard, the Jordan Mason, and Stevenson, that kind of build, Joe. When I look at it and I see it, it makes me feel that David Montgomery isn't necessary, because the three components that you just added after that, after Patrick Mahomes, are basically kind of in similar-ish situations, with Tony Pollard having the better of all those situations. And drafting David Montgomery there just doesn't work. It just doesn't work for me. Yeah, and that's what we were hoping for. We were hoping for Ramondre.
This is going to be Andrews, Bob.
But it didn't happen.
This is going to be Andrews here now that we didn't get Stevenson.
It's a bummer. It throws a cog into the wheel. But we're gonna bounce back. We're gonna bounce back from it. All right.
Yes, in the world.
Coming back around again, we don't have to worry about May. Stevenson's off the board. I'd like to take a chance on Beck. He should be around.
I'd rather go Higgins.
And you know what? Let's go Kyle Williams. A little bit of Patriots action.
Well, that's a little early for Kyle Williams.
All right, so
I'd rather go Higgins.
Okay, I'm okay with Higgins too. Like I said, the ADP varies a lot on underdog. Usually, what you're seeing from Higgins,
well, it's Ross still, yeah.
Higgins, Kyle Williams, Trey Harris, all coming around at the same time. And Ant.
Well, see, I think Higgins has the best pathway to never coming off the field. Trey Harris could lose his job to QJ.
I believe that's true.
Bell being injured, all Higgins has to do is be better than Christian Kirk, and I think he is.
That's possible. So Ant,
now I get the argument for Beck, because there's no competition in the Raiders. I just believe that the Houston passing game is going to be just way better than Beck. I mean, just the way it is.
Tyler Shook is live, super live. If we were to have gotten Shaheed, or if we still get Shaheed, a Tyler Shook stack is still live, Joe. It's a gross, dirty stack.
Dude, if we get Shaheed and Penix on the turn, I'll do that all day.
But it does play into what we want to do. But also, I just want to point out, Joe, you and I talked over text the other day, and you were saying that Tyler Shook is a great last round guy. He has been skyrocketing up. He is now.
Well, he was great that I got him in the last round when we were doing our pre-draft stuff. And you guys were like, I was taking him before the combine. And you guys were saying, he's never going to get drafted. Shadur's going to go before him.
I said Shador would probably go before him, but I never said that. But back to this,
it was the third tight end. He's almost guaranteed the starter. I love it.
Right now, when you're clicking Ramondre, and why he's one of the better-ish clicks in my mind for these couple of rounds, right? You look at where Ramondre is, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th round. I'm looking at, if I'm looking at running back, this is the question, is that in this round, there are not going to be many wide receivers taken. So where's your competitive advantage at? Also, quarterbacks are going a lot here. Then we also have these running backs that are rookies, or their situations are kind of murky, right? What we do know is Trevion is going to take some of this role from Ramondre Stevenson. But is he better or worse than Zach Charbonnet in the same kind of situation? Travis Etienne, Bashal Tutin, Jadon Blue, Javonte Williams, Cam Scadaboo. It's all murky. So if you are going to click something, click on one where they're at least going to make an effort to continue to pound the rock and run the ball. I can't say that's absolutely true out of Javonte Williams and Jadon Blue. Javonte Williams hasn't proven anything to me over the last couple of years.
No, he has to be a mirage. Like Jadon Blue is that running back.
Yeah. Well, there goes Shaheed. Can't get Shaheed. That's all right.
I can't, but
you get Penix.
We can go. So Penix did not make it to us. That got a little unfortunate, a little fast.
Who you want here?
We can go Williams, the tight end from, or the question, the one from New
let's
England.
go Kyle. Yep.
And then we probably got to go Bryce Young. As sad as that
a
is.
lot of quarterbacks have come off the board. This is a quarterback heavy draft. And when that happens, sometimes you don't get the pieces that you want. And that happens. You have to be flexible when you're drafting with a certain strategy or an intention in mind.
Look at McMillan dropping. Wow.
The likelihood that he gets back to us would not be high. So this is definitely
Bryce Young would not have come back to us.
This is definitely Bryce Young. Shook is on the menu, even with Olave there.
Well, that's why he's on the menu, because Olave's there.
It'd have been real nice with a Penix. And if we could have gotten Penix and Pitts, that would have been real nice.
Well, just Penix, period. But it works out.
And also go back up to the top, Joe. Can you just go up to the top for a moment? Garrett Wilson, Tet, Chris Olave. Okay, go down. I'm liking the way that this room is shaking out. There's a lot of correlation in a lot of different ways. Cincinnati heads over to New England.
Basically only drafted from 2 divisions. I mean,
Cincinnati heads over to New England.
The Johnson selection,
the Steelers have that correlation
with
Cincinnati.
East.
We have the NFC South correlation to New England as well. Houston, I believe, has some correlation there as well. So there's a lot of correlated relationships here, which I'm a big fan of. As I said, Shook is going to
again. All of our teams are from the NFC South, AFC East, or AFC North.
Yeah, so I am okay. I think right now most of the picks are going to be about where we see upside coming at. Also, Hunter Henry. So I'm hoping that, noticing that Dalton Kincaid came off the board, Hunter Henry is probably going to be the next tight end that most people take with Pat Freiermuth. So those 2 guys are most likely going to be.
Well, here's the list of tight ends available right now, Bob. Goddard, Fergie, Taylor, the rookie in the Jets, Ferguson, Strange, Otten, Henry. So Henry's probably the second pick on this turn. To stay true to what we're trying to achieve here. I wouldn't mind. So looking at our current build, currently we have 2, 3, 7. So this pitch probably should be a running back.
Yeah. I really don't like.
I think Algier has standalone value by himself. I definitely think he has value when you have Bijan.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't. If we didn't have Bijan, I would have taken him, but I can't realistically take him with Bijan there.
So here's your running back.
A guy who has an interesting pathway. So a guy that has an interesting pathway that we were taking a lot of earlier in the preseason, or not in the preseason, but in the other pre-draft drafts. A guy that's very live for me is Dylan Sampson. The pathway in Cleveland is kind of still murky, but one of the things that we just learned over the weekend is that the Browns don't really have a plan to bring back Chubb. We also know that Ford is just okay. So in my mind, with the rookie battle that's happening with Judkins, and knowing that Judkins wasn't a full-time player at Ohio State, taking a chance on a guy like Sampson, if ADP lines up, makes a lot of sense to me. We got that correlation with Cincinnati. We got that correlation a bit with the Steelers as well. He can catch passes.
We also got a little Baltimore with Andrews. So
and he can catch passes. The framework is there. There are game scripts that we can talk through and talk out where that would make sense. Is he comfortable as a 4th running back? I'm not super comfortable with him as a 4th running back, but that's okay. There goes Mason.
Based on how strong our top 3 running backs are, I don't think it doesn't really matter.
Fun fact, though, Joe, about Mason Taylor at 14. You don't believe the Jets will be super successful, and I get the trepidation there. But what I do know is that Justin Fields has one of the highest percentages of any quarterback to throw to the tight end. And they went out and they invested in Mason Taylor. They got rid of Tyler Conklin. So that speaks volumes for the skills and abilities that they think that Mason Taylor has. And when I build Fields, I'm also going to be building Mason Taylor from now on. It's going to come hand in hand. Mason Taylor's so cheap. And at this point in time, when we think about where is upwards value, none of these guys that were taken like in the last 10 through the next like 4 picks here, they're just all kind of in that same point totals that taking stabs on them here and there are not going to kill you when you're building your portfolio. Like I said to you on the phone the other day, I am way
over rookie stabs at this time of
the
draft.
I am way over invested in Pierce, but at this point in time, one of the things that's like I always get trapped into with a guy like Pierce is that his best ball positioning is like it's in that same Gabe Davis conversation that we've been having for so many years, right? Is that, when you got a guy that can potentially get 20 points in the 16th, 15th, 16th round, that's crazy good. And would you rather have him over the veritable hodgepodge of tight ends that are never going to do that? Or are you going to take a wide receiver who has proven time and time again that he can't do that? It's a problem. Hey, Rabona, how's it going? We appreciate the love. Thanks very much, man.
Yeah, make sure you click like and subscribe, guys, by the way.
Yeah, we would do it way more often, but, schedules.
Following the 4th of July, we will do it way more often.
Incoming children, outgoing children. But yeah,
well, you won't be in school anymore following the 4th of July. It'll be awesome.
Probably once June and July hit, we'll be probably doing 3, maybe 4 days a week, depending on how the schedule turns out. We also, just so you guys know, in the chat right now, we also registered ourselves for the Scott Fishbowl contest. Joe and I are both going to be drafting here in Pittsburgh for Scott Fishbowl. So that's going to be exciting. We'll keep you up to date on that throughout the year, but we're really pumped about that. That's the first year we got into it. We decided to do it in our hometown. A guy, we were talking about this guy last week, Joe, Roschon Johnson. Roschon Johnson is one of those guys that I have been seeing climbing up more and more. The narrative speaking there is that if you don't believe in DeAndre Swift, there's not really a huge reason to believe in Monangai. But what you do know is that Ben Johnson likes to use 2 running backs, Thunder and Lightning, right? And so if Swift becomes a pass catching option in the vein of like a Gibbs, well, then Roschon Johnson could still have a role if the Bears continue to move the ball. I kind of like him if you're short on running backs this late in the draft. I don't mind him. You know what I'm saying? You should already have 3 or 4 by this point in time. And if Roschon's your 5th, again, no skin off my back. I can't fathom though, Joe.
Okay, that makes sense.
I can't fathom though what the guy sitting there at the 8 hole is doing, drafting 4 straight tight ends. Do you see that?
I see that? Stupidity. It's all around me.
Rabona, once the contests open, we were going pretty heavy. So we only typically do 1 or 2 live drafts when we go on. But we're hammering them. We're going to probably clear out this DraftKings one, probably before kickoff of the season, fairly easily.
Personally, I will have at least 100 Mega Million entries.
I've been doing a lot of schnauzers on Underdog, because that contest fills up pretty fast. It's already around 50% full, and I want to clear that because it's a really cheap entry level contest on Underdog, and the payout is not terrible for what you're putting into it. So if I clear out a bunch of those first and then start getting a little bit more best ball manias once the schedule comes out, so that you can play into that correlation a little bit more, especially your week 17 correlation. I like that. So I'm not going as heavy on that day, right now, but you can get a good closing line value on a lot of players if you do go in early on that.
Oh, that's absolutely true.
Thanks,
doing
the
drafts at different types of the year give you different values. And this is why I never really buy into worrying about the percentage owned of a particular player And there's a lot of reasons I don't worry
so
about
here's
that.
something
One
fun.
of which is your starting spot's randomized, so therefore that should take care of a lot. The other part is as players change, the values on each of them will as they climb and drop down the boards. So hit what you think is the best play today and let the rest of ownership percentages take care of itself.
Don't Joe,
worry about is my point.
One of the things that I think is really interesting. So we consume a lot of fantasy football content from other creators as well. One creator that has a very big stats oriented mindset is Ryan Heath from Fantasy Points. They have a really intriguing data suite that you can look up a bunch of different stats from. But one of the things that I think really kind of sits with me when I look at what he's doing and when I look at some of the stats, some of the stats from other resources as well, is that there's a really high correlation between how successful you can be in the regular season and how much of a certain position that you take and when you take that position. And we talked a little bit about this a couple weeks back.
Bob, you need to go a little deeper on that because I lost you in there.
So one of the things that, that a lot of creators are suggesting and talking about is the perfect setup for a team, right? How you build a team matters. Who you put on the team matters.
3-6-8-3.
Yes. So one of the reasons why things like the 3-6-8-3, a 2-5-7-1, 2-5-7-2 kind of things are so successful is that the hit rates, as you and I have talked about over the course of time, on running backs, and we talked about this last week a little bit with everybody in the audience that was here. If you look at the chances for running back hit rates, and that's why we often do like to take all of these back end running backs in the off chance. Like I like Ollie Gordon there a lot as well because he could be the Thunder in that offense.
Oh, he is the Thunder. That's not could be. He is.
But one of the things to notice is that when we look at the pathways for these running backs, they are often only one play away, right, from seeing a full-time volumatic role, right? So let's say Alvin Kamara goes down. Devin Neal and Kendre Miller now become next up. Let's say Jonathan Taylor goes down. Will they use DJ Giddens more, or will they use the guys that they already brought in? Steelers, for example, I believe the Steelers just signed Trey Sermon. Will they use Trey Sermon, Jalen Warren?
Sermon is a camp body and nothing
but
more.
What I'm saying is, hey, family, what's up, man? What I'm saying is that research indicates when you go in and you look at these stats, research indicates that it is a much better pathway in the regular season for these big tournaments to lean in to running backs a little bit later, right? And not spending so much draft capital in the running back pool. That's one of the reasons why we suggest never doing 3 running backs in the first 4 rounds or 3 running backs very high, because you are investing too much capital in there a lot of times that you're losing it in other sections. Let's take an example here.
I disagree with that because this year in particular, there's only 12 running backs that have a chance of getting more than 60% of the team's touches.
It's not saying
you can get those 12, you get those 12.
The stats are not saying that it's fully bad. It's saying that when we look at the numbers, it's important to consider the draft capital used to get those numbers.
Oh, it's the same thing that says, well, you should never draft 6 or 5 receivers to start a draft.
Precisely. Precisely.
Because you never should draft on your flex. Who the hell took Roman Wilson? Are you guys shitting me?
That would have been a nice get. That would have been a nice
all right,
get.
Bob. Best flex on the board. Holy hell, did this get ugly fast?
It's round 20. So, take who you want. Take who you
I don't want any of them.
Just pick them. Click somebody. Click them. That was gross.
I wanted
That was
Roman
really
Wilson.
gross. We're going to talk about
I've
this
never
draft.
seen
We're going to
anyone
talk about
strike
this
Roman
draft.
Wilson off me off the last pick.
So I'm on the clock in a startup dynasty family says here 404. You take Love as QB2 or Brees Hall / Henderson. Best options I see. All right. So, it's startup dynasty. If it's super flex,
It has to be super flex, or you wouldn't be debating Love.
Yeah, if it's super flex, which it most likely is, I can make it. So I can make a reasonable argument to say that Love could be a fairly successful quarterback this season, but I wouldn't want to own any of the wide receivers for them. And I can make a reasonable argument, and I have multiple times, why I think Brees Hall and Travion Henderson are good options as well. So if I'm sitting there at 407 as well, and you can get the running back if you take Love, I probably would take Love.
I think that's the right call.
And hope that the other two are there. One of the things that we know about Love, and we can pull up.
Brees Hall still on the board. There will be a running back there.
I just want to talk about Jordan Love.
I also want to have Caleb Johnson though. Brees, but that's the side story.
You guys know that I do like Jordan Love as a quarterback, but last year was not it. It was a struggle, and that was I feel you can look at a couple of stats to think about, right, when it comes to Jordan Love. So when we look at Love and we say, okay, where was the failure to launch point? So Joe mentioned, earlier in the episode, he said quarterbacks that have a full-time role in the second season tend to do some struggling. This was his second.
And you make an argument that was applicable to him.
This was the second full season. He played in a couple games prior, but this was his second full season. Then we go and we look, what happened after the bye week? After the bye week, the coach basically made a decision and said, we have Josh Jacobs. We bought Josh Jacobs. We're going to hammer Josh Jacobs because Jordan Love, we don't believe that you're fully 1,000% healthy yet. And looking at him out on the field, he did not look 1,000% healthy yet. So when you track that and you say, okay, what is Jordan Love's upside? Jordan Love's upside is QB1, QB2 overall in a week. That's his upside. And I can make an argument for you to say that upside just got more up for me because they went out and they got a wide receiver. They went out and they did the things that we were worried about last year. Now, would I want any of those wide receivers on my fantasy team? Probably not, because what we saw last year was that they spread it all around. Jordan Love last year. So this is crazy, right? This is crazy. In the game against Minnesota, week 4, he threw the ball 54 times. Okay. The rest of the season, after that game, 1, 2, 3, 4, he only had 4 games above 30 after that. And the rest of them were sub 30, some of them sub 20. So you look at it and said, well, they're winning games, like legitimately winning games when Jordan Love didn't have to throw the ball. So will that continue to happen? I don't know, but I can make a reasonable case to say Jordan Love still has number 1 overall quarterback upside if things shake down in his favor, if you're to write that narrative. And his value right now is tremendous. Like, where did he even go in this draft? I'm thinking like 12th round, maybe 11th round.
Let's pull him up.
Now, here's the thing.
Here's your herd of quarterbacks. He's in there. He's at 10-4.
So 10-4.
10-4
so
is where he went.
If I'm in a startup dynasty right now, and I have the option of grabbing Baker in the next round, and then taking Taylor and Kyron. Now, if you take Taylor and Kyron, what you're saying to yourself is, I'm going to try to win this year. Because when we look at startup pieces and we look at dynasty in general, right? I'm usually going to take my early picks to take, proven talent that's young. And Brees Hall fits that bill. Taylor, still young, but has dealt with a lot of injuries. Kyron, been in the league a couple of years, but there's no inclination that he's going to continue to stay on the Rams past this year. Baker already been in the league for a couple years, but definitely a win now quarterback. Jordan Love, only 2 years of starting experience. He could give you a lot more towards the future because it doesn't seem like they're going to be moving on from him. They are invested in him. Okay. So while I do love Baker, and I probably in a redraft would not take Jordan Love over Baker Mayfield, I could see myself doing it in Dynasty. However, I still do think that Jonathan Taylor has a lot left to give us. And if you gave me Jonathan Taylor at that 404, and even still, Jordan Love might still be there at your 407. And if you had to wait for Baker, I don't necessarily see it as a huge problem because this season,
I don't see Baker at 407 being a problem either.
That's what I'm saying. You can see where this balancing act is going to come at for Dynasty perspective. Like if we look at here,
I love that you already have done trades in your introductory draft. Love it. Love how you move the board around, family.
So I'm just going to look up JT for a minute. I just want to see something about Taylor for a minute. So Taylor is sitting here a couple years in the league, but he's still 26. And, we're not expecting a real fall off until probably about age 28, right, Joe? I mean, typically speaking, when we look at these running backs, he's young enough where the fact that he's sliding doesn't make any sense. Kyron, 24 he's 24 years old. But again, a guy like Kyron, will he be successful if he lands on another team? I don't know. What they're telling me, what they're telling me from the Rams perspective is that they're not making an investment in Kyron. Like you look at it, Joe, they went out 2 consecutive years in a row and grabbed running backs. That tells me that's not.
McVay's actually grabbed a running back every draft he's ever been in charge of.
His
entire life. He's always drafted a day 3 running back.
Now,
always.
Taylor, on the other hand, they did draft DJ Giddens, but also Taylor is a stud right now. He can produce running back overall number 1 numbers, and he's done it again and again and again. So if it were me, family, I would take Taylor at the 404. If you want Love, he's not a bad choice, but I would take Taylor. And then at the 407, if Love's still there, I'd grab Love. If not, and you wanted to go with Breece Hall Henderson, I would totally do something like that and then come back with Baker on the back end. It all depends on how you feel you want that team to work out. If you haven't built any running backs or you're not comfortable doing that and you'd rather have the solid super flex quarterback, I would definitely buy into Love. So let's take a look.
Yeah, so let's recap the narrative, Bob. The narrative was you believe New England can win their division, and the way in which that's going to happen is they have to run the ball and play defense. They're not a very high-scoring team, and Josh Allen has to get hurt. And I understand for this to be the first scenario, so many people out there screaming, had they lost week 18, they would have had the first pick overall. I get it. But when you look at this schedule, particularly the home schedule, it only has 2.5 losses on it. They're losing to Buffalo at home, and they're probably losing one or the other to Atlanta or the Steelers. Their road games are their really hard one. They're not winning in Tampa. They're not winning in Buffalo. They're not winning in Miami. They'll beat Miami at home, but not on the road. Their only real chance of winning road games are at the Meadowlands, which we'll see a lot of road teams winning for both teams, at the Saints, and at Carolina.
Now,
at 10 wins, Josh Allen gets hurt. 10 wins that division.
What went well here is we got a lot of correlated value to the Patriots pretty early. The NFC South is going to play the Patriots, the AFC East, AFC North. We got a lot of correlated value. What we missed on is that we didn't get Ramondre. He went a little bit earlier than ADP. So we got Henderson, a guy who can catch the ball, run the ball. I'm fairly confident in that selection. Then we got Hunter Henry as well and Kyle Williams. Now, predicated that we specifically don't believe that Drake May will be a super successful fantasy quarterback, especially in leagues that have -3 for interceptions. DraftKings thankfully only has -1. But Drake May's value did not align to where we wanted to take him. So scroll down a little bit so that you guys can see kind of what we're talking about here. So when we came back and we take a look at where Drake May went in the 10th round. Now, we were prepared to take him.
Every time we have Olave as our fourth receiver, I love our build.
So
I just love it when Olave is our fourth receiver.
We were comfortable taking Drake May in the 10th round. But unfortunately, he didn't come back to us. So we had to pivot off of him to Mark Andrews. Why did we pivot to Mark Andrews, you might ask? Well, it plays into that correlation that we already built in with T. Higgins and Caleb. We think that
we also got him a round and a half later than his ADP.
We think the Steelers are going to be able to run the ball fairly successfully this year. The Ravens play these teams really well. Mark Andrews is a definite cog in the system. While he doesn't score a lot against the Steelers, he does score against
a hell of a lot against Cincinnati, though.
Coming back then in the 12th round, getting Kyle Williams at value is pretty nice, knowing they invested a decent amount of draft capital in him. So now we have two Patriots players that we think are going to be relatively successful if the Patriots are going to win the AFC East. Scroll down. Before we talk about other teams, I do want to talk about other teams. I do want to get to what Family said here. Then building in Hunter Henry. He is our third Patriot. So you're going to see it's not a huge amount of Patriots on this team. We're not crazy. We're not crazy people. But
yeah, because it's a running team that's going to do it. It's not going to be a high-scoring offense.
We wanted Ramondre, like we said, but he went a little bit earlier than ADP, and that happened. So we pivot. Hunter Henry here in the 16th round or 15th round, good value, particularly considering that a guy just took 4 tight ends in a row. If you do that, you just donated your money. The stats, the research, everything points to that's a terrible idea. Even if you are backfilling, you cannot backfill with 4 tight ends. That's absurd.
Yeah, like we did that a couple times last year as an experiment. Every single team that we took 4 tight ends with failed to get out of the first round. Every single one of them.
But then you look at also what the correlation is that we built in. We also, by taking Tet, who has a correlation to the Patriots and should be relatively successful, even though he's going to face Christian Gonzalez, you should look and see, okay, well, I also have Olave. They play the Patriots as well. Well, I also get some divisional correlation with them. They play each other twice a year. So why not buy into Bryce Young? Why not buy into Tyler Shook? Also, having Justin Fields isn't bad for that first couple of rounds. Then you take it to where some value is in these running backs. Dylan Sampson has a pathway to be successful in the league. Devin Neal, Kamara's not the cleanest bill of health. Kendre Miller has been in the doghouse for years. Devin Neal has a pathway to be successful. And Brashard Smith, while there are other weapons on this team, Brashard Smith is a converted wide receiver. So I can't see Andy Reid not using him. So there is a lot of value there. It's just interesting. All right. Now to Family, to your point, before we get back to the draft board, you mentioned here that the QB market is going to look very different in 2 rounds. So then I would take Love. If I didn't have another pick in the 5th round at all, you said you have the 407 and the 404. I would definitely use one of those picks for a running back. And if you felt more confident taking Love first, knowing that he probably wouldn't last for you, and then just taking whoever's left out of those 4 running backs, I could see that. I think all 4 of those running backs are stellar. I have a preference for Jonathan Taylor over all of them. So I might be allured into JT. But if you don't have the capability and you don't want that framework to you don't want to be pushed into like a Joe Flacco or anything like that.
No, you don't want that. So team players,
it's there.
One of the natures of this narrative that we went through to be able to make it successful was we ended up effectively playing 3 divisions for the majority of this team. Obviously, the NFC East, that's who the Patriots are in. They played the AFC North and the AFC South.
Yeah.
For the upcoming one on Wednesday, Bob, I want to propose this to you. What if you believe Patrick Mahomes is going to throw the ball all over the yard?
Oh,
and
I mean,
they're going to
okay.
try to score 28 a game.
So if that's the case, so for example,
I think that should be Wednesday, man.
I do want to look at this draft board, but I do want to talk a little bit about what you just said. So
what if you believe Patrick Mahomes will lead the league in passing? Because he's never done that before, and his ego says he will do it at least once in his career.
This is how I'm drafting. So just kind of, if that's what we decide
for Wednesday, guys.
Yeah, if that's what we decide to do on Wednesday, what I'm thinking of is my perfect draft would start with most likely Ladd and Brock Bowers. I know that.
So you want to be at the end.
I know that sounds absurd. But one of the reasons why I like that is that, you know, when we see a competitive game with the Chiefs and, you know, how this is going to have to run, we know it's going to have to run through the air. So I am automatically eliminating Genty. I'm well, not automatically, but if we believe that he's going to throw the ball a lot, then I'm probably not taking as much Genty. I'm probably not taking as much of Denver's running game or of, you know, Pacheco or anything like that. I'm probably hammering Rice and Worthy probably fairly early. You could see a Patrick Mahomes in the 7th round, Rice and Worthy. Ideally, you want to be on the end there. So I could see an ideal team, if that's the belief system going into it, would be Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, you want to be the 10th pick. Yeah.
Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy. And then you'd want a running back. You'd want a running back there. You can make a discussion point for that's, or I'll take Travion and Caleb and whatnot. But then after that, you know, building in up Rashard Smith, maybe not being afraid of Travis Kelce in that draft. I think that could be a really interesting.
I think that will be a fun episode. I don't have to draw a narrative. I know every Bengals game is going to end 50-49. That's like my default setting of life. They drafted nothing on defense. But yeah,
to that point though, family, what I just don't like about drafting the Bengals this year is that you are telegraphing so much. And like,
they're the first pick, really.
Here's the thing. Like, I can see a discussion point in my head that if the Bengals were going to be 50-49, that I actually may not want to build in Joe Burrow. I actually might want to take in those first 3 rounds, Jamar, T, and Chase. Okay. That's going to be really contrarian to what the belief system is. But if you hammer those 3 guys first, then nobody has a real reason to take Joe Burrow from you unless they're just being an asshole. So like if you play it that way, you are telegraphing yourself to a degree, right? So we're talking about possible scenarios that you can draft with. So if I'm doing that, I might actually build Lamar, to be honest with you, right? If I'm sitting there and my first 2 picks, maybe I don't want Chase Brown, but if I'm sitting there and I believe that the Bengals are going to score 50 points a game and their opponent's going to score 49, then I'm hammering Jamar and T, and then I'm taking Lamar. That's the contrarian play there. Okay.
So, Dom, welcome back, man. Haven't seen the season end. Dude, if I were you, absolutely, I would avoid Tyreek Hill at the beginning of the 2nd round. And my entire reasoning for this is that is so incredibly fragile in Miami. I mean, we saw what happened with Tua got a concussion. There's nothing to say he won't get another one. There's also nothing to say that if Tyreek loses a step, he's nothing. So I add that up and say
you don't even have to go there.
for 2-2, I would rather go with McCaffrey, who also has a ton of risk, but because he plays running back, I'd rather do it there. So to me, Tyreek is way too much risk for 2-2. 3-2, all right, not 2-2.
If I'm at the 2-2, here are the guys that I'm looking at, depending on who I built in the first round. These are the guys that should be available around the 202. Nico, usually there.
Love Nico.
There. McCaffrey, Bowers, and you could just look at the second round. I don't even have to read the names off. But depending on what I want to build and what my circumstances are, I can see a really nice start to a team if you're at that 202 spot. And let's say you got Malik Neighbors and you take A.J. Brown or you take Brock Bowers. I think anybody from, like, you can see this board right now, Garrett Wilson all the way up into Brian Thomas Jr. are going to be better picks than Tyreek. The thing is, I did it again. The thing is about this. So if I def go Nico at the 111, then CMC in the 202, both high risk, high reward. And here's the thing. I don't actually think Nico is a high risk. Yes, he has gotten injured. But what we do know is that unless it's like a super significant injury, the guy is a beast.
Guy fights back.
CJ Stroud has made it a point. And now you can say it's because they didn't have any other weapons or that it was the only option. But I mean, even in just the limit, he was out, 5 games last year? And he still
went in top 20.
He still cracked like 170, 180 PPR points, and he missed 5 games. Yeah. So, I mean, when you look at where are the touchdowns going in Houston, 2 areas. It's Joe Mixon, it's Nico.
And Mixon's getting less of that.
All right.
So,
and I don't even think
your point there, I would way rather go Collins than Thomas Jr. Jacksonville scares the hell out of me. Because first off, Thomas didn't do anything with Lawrence. He did it with Jones. Jones isn't there. So with Thomas, I get it's a new system you want to build around it. I get that Kirk isn't there, but they got Hunter. So I look at it and go, Thomas to me, Jacksonville in general to me is you got to prove it. And I also got to say, I am a little hurt by this because more than any other team last year, Jacksonville was the most underperforming from entry expectations of what we have. Now, granted, the team that overperformed the most was Cincinnati, but for comparison, Jacksonville did not produce anywhere near they should have. There's a lot of history that says Jacksonville will fail. Jacksonville is kind of like the NFL version of the Iowa Hawkeyes. They will give you
I disagree with that.
They will give you 1 year every 4 years, and then they will do nothing in between. That is the Jaguars.
But to that point, though, Joe, that you're making is that so if I'm only building one team, okay, Dom, if I'm only building one team and I'm not building all these teams like in Best Ball Mania, what I want to look into is I want to look into the tendencies of my opponents because, you know, in a lot of leagues that we all do together, we know our league mates pretty much, unless we're just doing something random on Sleeper or we're doing something random on DraftKings. Hey, Bones,
we do an auction league. I know I will never be able to buy Lamar Jackson unless I spend half of my wad.
Yeah, because our friend Steve will just blow all of the auction money on Lamar Jackson. Fun fact, he ain't getting Bijan either or Saquon. They're staying on my team. Get over yourself.
Keepers, baby. Keepers.
When we look at how I want to build a singular team from like a redraft perspective, you know, I'm not super mad at the Brian Thomas Jr., but I know that in most of my leagues, I would never do that because my league mates have a tendency to overdraft running backs. And so I know that by the end of the 3rd round, when that 3rd round comes to me, then I'm not getting anything at running back. Hampton will be gone. Cook will be gone. Kyron will be gone. Bucky will be gone. Brees will be gone. Everybody will be gone. So when I look at my leagues and when I look at my league mates, I say, okay, well, what are their tendencies? So if I have a league that tends to roll wide receivers a little bit earlier, then I would push Nico and Brian Thomas Jr. at that 111. And
Collins is a steal at 111. I'm telling you that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've taken him, like I said, I've taken him as early as 1.5 when I've had, and that's just to kind of be a little bit contrarian. Jesse
Collins.
I could go either way on this, but I'm gonna tell you this right now. I'm gonna lay my plant my flag in the sand. I'm on Team Collins on this. One of the reasons why I like Collins so much, number one, they play in a division where the defenses just aren't that good.
No. And most of the division is inside.
Secondly, both Collins and CD are high target earners. And CD and Collins, both to me, like they are, I think the thing that sets it up for me a little bit more is that I feel like Collins can, and people are going to disagree with this statement, but I feel like Collins can take over a game. CD can too, to a degree, but I just feel like the way that the Dallas Cowboys are managed, in that, like, George Pickens will help that a lot, but I'm not quite sure that I want to over invest in a guy like CD. I will take him in a heartbeat.
I mean, CD's still great. This is not talking shit on CD. CD's still
there's a reason. Like, there's a reason why this ADP is kind of structured the way it is, right? Is that people are expecting CD Lamb to over earn on targets, not get hurt.
And I don't think that's going to happen now. You can't bring in a diva like Pickens and think that CD is going to keep his target share. And this is the other major reason that I'm on Collins, is that I flat out believe much more in Stroud than I do in Dak. Dak is getting close, so you're going to have to show me you're still a top 8 quarterback. I'm giving Stroud all the benefit of the doubt in terms of throwing the ball. I think he's better than. I'm not totally sure Dak has truly recovered.
Well, I mean,
both
like,
physically and mentally from the injury.
Well, like, here's the thing. I am okay. I'm okay with CD. There's nothing wrong with CD at all. And I'm not even trying to like stir the boat with Nico at all. But any stats that you look up about both of these guys is that they are very clearly top 4 wide receivers, right? If Jamar Chase wasn't in the league and J-Jeff wasn't in the league, you would be having a realistic discussion at, do I want to take CeeDee Lamb, Nico Collins, or Puka Nacua up there? And you might even argue Neighbors. I would not
argue Neighbors.
You could. But what I want to point out, though, is I just want to look at the per game basis here, just to kind of build off this point, and then I want to get to that comment there by Dom. Is that when I look at a per game basis, and we look at wide receivers, it's just running a little bit slow, and we go to per game basis, and we see, okay, like, what's going on across the whole season, is that reception wise, CeeDee Lamb, Drake London, Justin Jefferson, Malik Neighbors, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase are doing like are doing a lot with their receptions, right? But then you go into, okay, well, who's just 1 or 2 receptions behind and getting just as many yards? It's Nico. And where are those yards coming from? There's a shit ton of air yards from a lot of people. But like, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, there is a reason to believe that Nico is one of those guys that is a tremendous talent, Joe. And he's just starting to scratch the surface of what he could be. Because from 2023 to 2024, he just picked up where he left off. And there's no reason to assume he's not going to do that. Again, this is kind of just what you like as a flavor here. I think both are going to end up finishing in the top 5 wide receivers overall.
Oh, yeah.
And you will probably see, or you could see, if something were to happen to Chase, right, or something were to happen to Burrow, that both of them would probably finish 1-2.
Here's the counter argument you could make if you wanted to be on Team CD. Houston's defense is very good. So they're not going to have a lot of desperation, have to throw the ball kind of games. And we all know the Cowboys, when they start imploding, they implode hard. That they can have an entire half a season of just chucking the ball nonstop. That's an argument to go to CD. But I think with the addition of Pickens, Houston doesn't truly have a number 2 right now. That because of that, Collins should stand alone.
And to that end, too, Joe, is that I think that why CD in these most recent ADPs got clocked into the top 5, and some people are taking him over Jamar over Jefferson, is that we were baking in that CD could be a like 200 catch, 200 target kind of guy because they didn't have another option. And I think the ADP has yet to normalize from the arrival of George Pickens. I do think that in some drafts that we've done, that there's
Draft Kings still has Pickens listed as the Steelers for the record.
I do feel that when we get to June and July, that CeeDee Lamb will probably fall after Puka, just because I think that when we think like where is upside at, I think so many people are down on Dallas, and there's reasons to be down on Dallas. There's plenty of reasons to be down on Dallas, but particularly in this ADP is that we're thinking best ball ADP, but when we look at redraft ADP, I don't think CeeDee Lamb is going to be as endearing to the fantasy community come when our actual money league drafts and long time standing drafts are going to go. I mean, again, he was tremendous last year. I'm not even like saying that he wasn't. But I just think that like when we look at it and we say, well, last year he had shitty quarterback play and he finished 1, 2, 3 times in the top 10. 3 times in the top 10 with shitty quarterback play, with good quarterback back play, and you only landed there 3 times, and I'm taking you in the top 5 picks. Do I want to do that? Right? There's going to be a lot of like that what have you done for me lately kind of mentality. Now, when we do the same thing, we'll do the same thing right here for Nico. Nico landed in there 1, 2, 3 times. So, reason to believe that there's some worry there. But again, he missed 5. And CD over here only, I believe CD was dealing with that shoulder injury, the AC joint, and he only missed 2 games. Mm-hmm. So there's reason to believe that in that missed time that Nico would have had maybe 1 or 2 more top 5 finishes. It's the same argument to make for a guy like Puka and why I value Puka a little bit higher than Amon-Ra, because what we saw, and this is nothing bad about Amon-Ra, of course, but what we saw from Amon-Ra is he's hit his peak.
Kind of, yeah.
He's hit his peak. We know what the peak is. Will
it's a good
he
peak,
have?
Though.
Jamar Chase, same thing. He hit his peak.
That's why I worry about taking Chase 1 overall. I really do. Like, you doing that again?
He as the number 1 overall player. I mean, rarely. You can look at the stats. You can see the past. Rarely do they come. So when you look at, and this goes back to my point, Dom, that we were talking about earlier, is that if you're in a wide receiver heavy draft and there's going to be value there at running backs a little bit later, Joe said, Christian McCaffrey's a good enough pick. I might even wait it out, because if I know my opponents are going to hammer wide receivers and my starting wide receiver is going to be Terry McLaurin and Xavier Worthy, I know like right off the rip,
it's a little scary,
and I'm going to be missing out on a difference of probably like 3 to 6 points every single week. So will that running back make up the difference? Well, I can make an argument that a guy like Achane or Taylor or maybe Bucky. It's crazy that Bucky went 3-6. That's surprising to me.
Yeah.
But with the injury risk that McCaffrey has, I wouldn't want. But again, McCaffrey is still Christian McCaffrey. And if he comes back, I just drafted a team the other day that I sent to Joe that was Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey. And like, that is probably like 3 years ago, like wet dream, right?
Oh yeah.
Which you would have never thought that would be possible. But if you can write the narrative within that framework of the team, and I believe I paired that with Lamar Jackson because, like in DFS,
I believe more McCaffrey than Barkley this year because there's historically speaking, if you have had more than 500 carries, you get hurt the next year. Barkley's actually had that happen to himself already in his career. So I for this upcoming year, I believe more in McCaffrey than Barkley, although relatively speaking, I think I'd rather have JT over both of them.
And let me tell you this. I just want to, I was just looking at this draft board, and obviously we're just showing the first 6 rounds here.
This
you
is
can
one
go
of
back
the
and
less crazy ones we've
hey,
had.
yo, what's up, Mr. Magic? One of the things that I'm really nervous about this draft season specifically is Denver. So I was talking with you about this many, many weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
In my early drafts, I was taking a lot of Denver. And Mr. Magic, you were with us, and family, you were with us as well when I was doing this. Jesse, you were with us as well. I was taking a lot of Denver, and I was talking a lot about Denver. You might not have seen the drafts because I did those at home. But one of the things that scares me is that I think that Denver is an interesting kind of pivot team for a lot of people, particularly when we look at where RJ Harvey is being drafted. Last week, we drafted RJ Harvey, I believe, in the 4th or 5th round, right around 55. And I think that was on Underdog when we did it. We might have
about the mid-5th. Yeah, that's right.
Now he's fluctuating. Now we talked about this during the pre-draft shows where we were talking about there are going to be running backs that start to move. We thought it would be Omarion. He landed in a great situation, but with Najee there, Najee then fell off.
He did not land. He granted a great career situation, not a great this year fantasy situation.
Caleb landed in a good situation, but he kind of stayed the same, and Judkins same, and RJ Harvey was the one to climb. Now, knowing the history of the way that Sean Payton uses running backs, I am comfortable enough to say that I would take shots on RJ Harvey. However, last year was a tremendous mess. And it can't be understated that, Javonte Williams wasn't it. But then they tried to get Audric Estime, a lot in the fantasy community talking about Estime, Beatty, McLaughlin. The whole room is up for grabs. It's a verifiable mess. And RJ Harvey, I'll get to that, Mr. Magic. RJ Harvey, for me, is one of those players that is kind of like a linchpin movement. Like wherever he goes, people are going to start to kind of take running backs a little bit higher. Like he went later, but then you see that whole string of running backs that came off the board after him. Quite frankly, I would be more comfortable with 3 out of those 5 backs that went after him than RJ Harvey himself. Then you look at above that and you say, okay, Courtland Sutton is also one of the linchpin wide receivers because a lot of people feel like Sutton is a huge touchdown kind of upside, but you got to look at the situation. You got to say, okay, well, those touchdowns came because there's no other options.
Yeah,
but then Denver invested. They went out and got Ingram. They went out and they got RJ Harvey. They're getting Marvin Mims back into it. Troy Franklin. They went out and bought Pat Bryant this year as well. And so you look at it and you say, okay.
Yeah, you added that all up. I think that they still don't have a number 2 receiver. They're searching.
But what I'm saying is this team is like a weird pivot team because I think that they're one of the teams, and this is something we can talk about at a later time.
And they're one Bo Nix regression away from being useless.
And that's the other thing where you walk into, and we talked about this because I was overdrafting some Bo in those early contests, and you were like, pump the brakes. And I'm like, the values are right. Pump the brakes. And I was like, okay, we'll pump it. And I say, and you said, well, quarterback regression, one of Bo Nix's strengths, moving out of the pocket. Does he have to do that anymore with RJ Harvey? And that's why I'm saying that Denver is kind of one of those interesting pivot teams that I'm not seeing a lot of super stacks from because I'm seeing a lot of uncertainty with Denver. But when I say this is that I think it really does correlate and affect how I'm thinking about drafting players from the AFC West, right? Is that how those games are going to play out? Is Denver going to be a team that can be productive in the same way that they were starting to be productive last year? Or are they going to fall off the cliff? Because right now, I can't get behind the value of Cortland Sutton in the 4th round. And I can't get behind the value of RJ Harvey yet in the 5th and 6th round, especially when Alvin Kamara, I know you hate Alvin Kamara, but especially when Alvin Kamara is still on the
So
board.
part of my answer to Magic
is on the board. I just can't do it. So Magic, rank these guys.
I'll jump into Buck and gather his thoughts on it here. For me, here's my rankings. Chuba's going to be 1. Walker's going to be 2. Connor, Mixon, Kamara. Mixon, Kamara are like bad A and bad B, though. Like there's a gap after Connor. So for me, it's Hubbard is standalone in the front. Walker, then Connor, although they're relatively close. The bottom 2 are next to each other in the land of bad, with Kamara slightly ahead of Mixon. Maybe
my number 1 is Walker. I'm ranking Walker ahead of those guys all day, every day. You can go in and you can research Walker. We all know he has problems. We all know that I was shitting on him last year because he couldn't stay healthy. We know we were shitting on him because the coaching staff didn't want to use him. But I'm telling you right now, Ken Walker is one of the best values of this draft. Here's why. Number 1, if Darnold stays as quarterback, Darnold has a propensity, while he can throw it, while he does like to throw it down the field, he does have a propensity to throw it more than other quarterbacks at the running back. What does Ken Walker do really well? He catches the ball. What does he do really well? He's explosive. So while his rushing stats necessarily the volume might not entirely be there, if he stays healthy for an entire season, he can easily finish as a top 8 running back. And you are getting him with tremendous value. He is one of those players that if I'm building wide receivers or a onesie in those first couple of rounds, that I'm absolutely smashing the button for Ken Walker. He's my number 1. Now, you all know how I feel about James Conner. James Conner, super productive player, 1 injury away from being done for the entire season. Also, he plays a bunch of games where he gets hurt and then doesn't come back in. They do have Trey Benson. They do have Amari DiMercato, but he is a tremendous player. But he is after Hubbard for me. Hubbard showed enough for me last year, even though he was very game script dependent. I do think that Carolina is going to be more successful in the passing game this year. Therefore, vis-a-vis, I do think they're going to spend more time in the red zone this year. Do I think that Trevor Etienne or Rico Dowdle will affect his value in the red zone? I can't say with 100% certainty yes. But what I do know is that they brought him back. They didn't have to bring Hubbard back. They brought him back. Then they went out to get some complementary pieces. So I'm walking in with mine is Walker, then Hubbard. Then all of those other guys are kind of I'm considering, but I don't really have a lean one way or the other. Like Kamara can still be super productive, but what we saw last year is that he has 1 huge game or 2 huge games of productivity and then falls off the map and is just kind of run of the mill. He's still good enough, but he's still kind of run of the mill at that point in time. And then with Mixon, I like Mixon. So if I had to rank them, I would go Walker, Hubbard, Connor, Mixon, Kamara.
And Magic, to answer your last question, Bones, I'll jump right to you here. I'm not trusting Spears nearly as much as I did last year. Last year I was big on Spears, not so much over here. So Bones, this is
Joe,
before
you get to that, Magic, to the point that we were making, and you can go back and watch a couple of episodes that we did recently, but the Titans added a bunch of wide receivers via the unrestricted free agency after the draft, in the draft itself. But I'm still smashing the button for Calvin Ridley add value. You're getting a guy that could potentially earn over 100 targets in the 6th round on a team that finally has a guy that could throw the ball. Then you're looking at it and you're saying to yourself, okay, will the Tennessee...
a lot of Chig super cheap.
Yeah. Well, I'm not they went out and got Gunnar Helm. I'm not like in love with Chig right now. But we'll see about that. But I also want to say, while I'm not 1,000% in love with this player, I will say that Tony Pollard is not offensible. And I'm going to read you. Listen, the reason I say he's not inoffensible is we look at where he has to be taken. Joe, can you go down in this best ball draft we just did and see where he landed? And then I'll get to the talking point before we answer Bones' question.
8.
Okay. 8th round. In that same vein, there's a bunch of other running backs that have question marks, and all of those wide receivers, as we went through last week, outside of Mooney, we are not comfortable investing. So if you don't want to take a quarterback there, Tony Pollard is inoffensible, even when you compare him to Jordan Mason. We might like Mason a little bit better. I prefer Ridley over Judy on Mr. Magic by a mile.
I agree with that.
When we look at the schedule this year, one of the things we know about Tony Pollard is that offensive line sucked, and he had to make a lot of effort on his own. The coaching staff also tried to pare it back because he was injured. So those are all big concerns, and that's why he's landing here in the 8th round. But I want to read you this schedule. Again, we don't have the exact dates, but we do have the opponents. Houston is rough. Houston is rough. Indy could be rough. Jacksonville, dealer's choice. Chargers, Kansas City, New England, Rams, New Orleans, Seattle, Arizona, Denver, Cleveland, San Francisco, Las Vegas.
I heard 5 wins at most.
If you believe they can be fairly competitive in a third or half of those games, Tony Pollard is an inoffensible click in the 8th round.
I don't. This actually is a good argument for Ridley because there's going to be a lot of garbage time, and he's the only viable. Bob, you might have sold me on Ridley.
A lot. I'm sold on Ridley in the 6th round. Every time if he's there, I'm
sold on him in the 4th. Because that's valuable information.
Listen, I mean, like looking at Travis Hunter here, right? When we look at the IDP options, if cornerbacks IDP leagues will count Travis Hunter as a cornerback. So what I've heard.
Bones, if they do count him as a corner, he is the biggest steal ever. Because if you can get an offensive player's data as a defensive player, you win. I mean, it's a cheat code. So I doubt they'd let you, but if they do, they do.
This is what is happening. It's very league dependent, but I do believe that some leagues are doing something like this because I've been reading a lot about this. Is that number one, if you draft Travis Hunter as an IDP, you get only his IDP.
No system is smart enough to do that.
No. This is the discussion happening, right?
Like people are manually changing it.
Leagues are trying to figure it out. So if you draft Travis Hunter, there are some leagues that if you draft Travis Hunter, you have to state prior to the week what position you're putting him in.
No, because the major 3, Yahoo, ESPN, and NFL Network, are incapable of that differentiation.
Right, but what I'm saying is that unless your league specifically dictates that you get points, offensive points for interceptions, or a return touchdown, or an interception returned for a touchdown, then it has no effect. So if you're in a regular league, Travis Hunter will be just wide receiver. In an IDP league, the discussions that are being had around the community are, do I want my league to handle this? Because if that's the case,
and Bones, you can see this official ruling from a commissioner right now. Our league will not be doing any of that crap. Whatever ESPN gives them, it gets. So you get the cheat code. Cut a check. Go buy them. Because I'm not doing that math.
But listen, if that's the case, you can make a reasonable argument for Travis Hunter in the 1st round. And that's a huge potential cheat code. And I don't trust it. I don't think league managers are going to make that happen because it would totally impact and ruin the integrity of your league. It would
be such a pain in the ass to go back and do the math. And
in my opinion, if he's listed as a cornerback, he should only be able to accumulate the IDP stats.
And the bigger answer is ESPN, Yahoo, and the NFL networks, the three biggest platforms, and none of them can differentiate it. Whatever the app gives you, you get. That's always my mantra. The app calls Taysom Hill a tight end, and you play him at a quarterback, good for you. Whatever the app does, the app does.
But that's the thing, though.
And because of that, he's worth a first-round pick in IDPs.
He won't be a steal, though. You will have to overdraft him, and you'll probably be. I personally, I am not.
Dude, if you have a corner who can give you 20 points, that is worth a first-round pick. That's not an overdraft.
The corners don't.
I know. That's why, because you get his wide receiver points as the corner. That's why it's a hack.
Magic, this is a good question. Scroll down, Joe.
Where to?
Towards like the back half of the draft. Mr. Magic asked here, if you had to pick a guy, but Bones, to your point though about Hunter, I think this will be a bigger discussion as the offseason goes on, and we see what's going to happen. Because I do think that if the Jaguars state that they're going to play him the majority of the time as a wide receiver, I don't think they're going to give him. That. I don't think that ESPN, Yahoo, and all those places are going to give him the cornerback designation. When you talked about Taysom Hill got the designation because he played X amount of games at the position. So in order for
I believe you're going to be right on that because it's the easier thing to do.
Yeah.
If I'm a programmer, it's easier just to call him a wide receiver.
Taysom Hill was able to accumulate quarterback stats, but you had to put him at the tight end position, which was
great. It was such a win.
Right? But I don't think he's going to have.
I won a league once by doing that. I'm not going to lie. But I'm so upset. That's why he only gave me half a championship for
it. If I had to pick a guy right now in May to be a late round league winner, it's Ollie Gordon.
Mine's Smith.
Here's why.
I don't think Pacheco's all that good. I think Hunt can be jumped over. I think Braylon Smith can be the starting running back in Kansas City. No question asked come Thanksgiving.
Now,
and that's a league winner because he wins your playoffs.
For me, why I feel that Ollie Gordon could be it is because they invested a decent amount in Jalen Wright, but he didn't perform adequately when he was on the field last year, fumbled a lot. When we look at Devon Achane, I love Devon Achane, but I do understand that, they want to find a medium for what his performance was. Do they want to bring him back to the year prior, or do they want him to be an every down back? And I think that Ollie Gordon is going to be a tremendous value, and he's probably going to climb up as we move through draft season significantly. We also talked about Roman Wilson. Bones, this plays into your comment about...
To your point, in this draft, he was in the 17th round. Come August, Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson will both be in the 12th round or higher. So right now, you're right. Calvin Austin is a little bit of a cheat code, or Roman Wilson, depending on who wins that number 2 receiving spot in Pittsburgh. Either way, none of these other receivers down here are anywhere close to the number 2 receiver on their team.
Here's the thing.
Maybe Wilson, but that's it.
When we take this outside of best ball, when we take it outside of a best ball perspective, right, and we look at, okay, where is a clear pathway for success? Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin are going to fight. And what I think is going to happen here, whoever wins that position is probably going to get, 60-ish targets, maybe. And that's going to be good enough in this back half. A guy that we've been hammering.
I like Luke McCaffrey late. I didn't notice he was not that far.
A guy we've been hammering
A guy we've
been hammering because we don't fully believe in Tyreek is also Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. We know what Miami likes to do. There's no reason to say that he can't be successful in Miami. I like that a lot. Go up a little bit, Joe, before we answer Mr. Magic's question here. So stop right there. When we look at this range of players and we see, well, where could the league winner come from this stretch of players? Like I said, I think Roschon could be a really interesting pick. I'm not going to go so far as to say that he'd be a league winner, but I do think his pathway is really interesting. Also, Derrick Henry has been so good for so many years, and I don't see a reason why he can't continue to be good for so many years. However, if he is not, I will have my head on a swivel, waivers, things like that, for the running game for Baltimore. When Derrick Henry goes down, it's most likely going to just be Lamar. However, that's true. There is a structural kind of thing to think about in that Justice Hill already has some standalone value. Will Keaton Mitchell, will Rasheen Ali be that guy? We were talking Rasheen Ali a little bit last year. What will happen there? I think that's an interesting kind of dynamic. Also, thinking of old running backs that get hurt, Christian McCaffrey. You can definitely see a pathway for a guy like Jordan James or Isaac Guerrero to be a league winner. Oh, and hey, by the way, there's a running back out there that is now a full year recovered, but isn't very explosive right now. Maybe that will come back. But as you look across this board,
talk about Chubb.
Nick Chubb, man.
No.
Chubb
will never recover.
Listen, look where you'd take him. Right? 17th round. And
what team is he going to go to?
I'm just saying, I'm not saying he's a league winner right now, but I'm saying if you think
this leads into Magic's question. Now, granted, the Chargers might have the most crowded quality backfield right now, until at least they cut the other guy from Baltimore who was always hurt.
Oh gosh,
last year. I do not think Hampton is going to get more than a 50% title share. Two reasons why. First, Harris is on a 1-year contract. So I believe there's a tendency to use as much as you can, have him go out the door, save the one you have for 3 years. So when Harris is gone, you can use him. The second spot is Harris is better than him. I mean, that's just Najee's better than him, especially for the system in which they have. Harris is 100% the style grit crap thing that Harbaugh loves. And
Hampton
it's going to be hard for Hampton to get more than 50% of the targets unless there's an injury. So I wouldn't bank on it at all this year. Dynasty is a different question, though. I think of Dynasty.
I think what you're going to see, though, Mr. Magic, about a guy like Hampton is that, we were hammering Hampton in our early drafts. We still like Hampton a lot. The landing spot is going to be good long-term. Kind of sucks for us fantasy-wise right now, especially on those teams we got Hampton and Najee, which really sucks. But to the same point that Joe was making about percentages, I could see a conversation where the beginning half of the season, it's 60-40. Najee, Hampton, targets, carries. Then by like week 7, if no injury happens, whatever running back is performing better at that point in time is probably going to get a little bump, and then another little bump, and then another little bump, and then another little bump. And if you're taking Omarion Hampton in the 4th round, your belief is that bump then transfers almost completely in the opposite direction and goes 60-40 to Omarion Hampton. But the nerve kind of thing that you have to go in, if you put Hampton in that 4th round position and you're taking him and he's your first running back, or he's your second running back, which isn't bad. But if he's your first running back and you trolled out a bunch of wide receivers or some onesies and a wide receiver, what I'm nervous about is just in general usage. We do know that the Chargers leaned in really heavy towards running the ball towards the back half of that season. Now, Justin Herbert is a proficient quarterback. He's a really good quarterback. And they just added Trey Harris. They have Ladd McConkey. They bought back Mike Williams. They went out and invested a little bit in the tight end market by going out and getting Tyler Conklin, and they have Will Dissly. Where my value is, what running back I really want, I really want the running back that's going to put it in the end zone. And at this point in time, we can't say without a shadow of a doubt that it would be Omarion Hampton. Because if it would be Omarion Hampton, I'd be comfortable taking him in the 3rd round. but we don't know. So if that inkling, if your inkling points yourself in the direction that Najee is going to be the back, and that's the same discussion point about Jordan Mason, Aaron Jones. What the coach said, and this is what Harbaugh is not saying, is that the coach said, well, Mason could be our goal line back, a little bit of 1A, a little bit of 1B. That's terrible for fantasy, good for real life, terrible for fantasy. So that's why Mason and Aaron Jones have plummeted. But you look at Omarion and who plummeted from there, Najee. Would I be go up, Joe? Where did Najee go here? I believe 10th round, something like that.
He went at 8-12.
So 8th round. So in the 8th round, if I can get, are you sure about that? Yeah. Okay. 8-12.
8-12 right here. Yeah.
That's almost a 9th round pick. If you're in best ball, no skin off your back. Try it. Take Najee, especially if you don't like Mooney, you don't need a quarterback, you don't like Downs. I mean, this is, again, my discussion point to Tony Pollard. It's an inoffensive option in the 8th round. It is not something we're doing in the 4th round, 5th round that people were doing in early best balls, but it has normalized back again. And if you can get Najee anywhere between the 8th and 10th round in a best ball, I don't see a reason not to take him, realistically speaking, depending on how you built your team. But will those percentages line up? I think by the end of the season, we're probably going to see more Omarion. So I think that Omarion will be more helpful towards the back end of the season. And, Najee will be helpful during the middle of the season. So like, if I were to do this in a redraft league, Joe, I would say I would draft Najee and trade him by week 5. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Like in best ball, of course, I can't do that. But I draft Najee with the intention of using him until week 4, week 5, and then trading. I think it could work. All right, everybody. We will be back Wednesday, 3:45. In the chat, leave some ideas for future episodes. Again, we're going to take narratives and put them on the page. We are drafting some best ball teams, and we are putting those into practice using narratives. You can go back and watch this episode to get a little bit about what we mean. This upcoming Wednesday, we are going to do what Joe talked about and talking about. If you believe Patrick Mahomes is going to throw at the pace that he was throwing.
No, if he's going to lead the league in passing, it's going to be that straightforward.
Passing, that is going to be Wednesday's show. Please join us Wednesday, 3:45 Eastern Standard Time. And thanks again for joining us.
Ba-boom.